Hey everybody, this is my 29-gallon miscellaneous tank, and today we're going to do a water change. We're going to do a before and after on this tank. I don't usually do that with this tank because it's a really simple process. I use a 5-gallon bucket and a gravel vac, and I just do a quick water change. It's got a hang on the back filters, so while the bucket's draining, it's, switch the filters out and wham bam, I'm done. It takes all of 5 minutes. However, today I'm going to do a couple of things differently. One, I'm going to get over here and have a look at this angelfish that seems to be acting very aggressively towards the other angelfish all of a sudden. I haven't noticed this behavior in a while. It happens from time to time. The larger angelfish becomes aggressive for a few days. I don't know if it's some sort of hormonal spike that happens from time to time. Not really sure why, but every now and again, this angelfish that gets along just perfectly fine with the other one suddenly gets really aggressive like this. So I guess that's happening again. Last time it happened, I had to separate them and take the big one out and put it in a different tank for several days, and it was quite a pain in the butt. So I don't know, I'm going to have to keep my eye on that. That was not planning on being part of this video. This was just going to be a simple before and after water change video. At any rate, the other aspect of this tank that I want to get cleaned up today is removing some of the tannins, which is just part of the water change. The tannins are in the water, of course, and then when I do the water change, it'll be a lot cleaner. And I want to get in there and work on the plants a little bit. I've always complained that this tank is very sparsely planted. I've got the inert gravel, if you want to call it gravel. It's really just sort of a dense plastic, little hard dense foam. You can even see some of the remains of the bright blue coloration and the pink and green that's been in there since way back in the day. I've also got some glass beads in the bottom. So it's a completely inert substrate, and plants don't do very well in here, but they do hang on a little bit. And I've got this temple plant that I cut out of my gourami tank a while ago, and they keep knocking it loose. I keep tucking it underneath the rocks on the bottom, and it keeps getting knocked loose and floating back to the surface. So I'm going to get in there again today and try once again to get it planted in such a way that it'll stay in there. And I also want to thin out some of the duckweed that's growing in there and just basically clear a little bit of that scumminess out, and maybe some of the older water sprite plant, and then I can, remove some of that and thin that out a little bit. You can actually see where it's starting to grow up and out the back section. So once again, no biggie, just a simple water change. I'm going to try to tuck that plant in, clean a few of the errant plants out, and then do a simple filter change. So have a good look at your before. Alright, and there's your after. So like I said, no fuss, no muss. It's real easy to get in there. I don't know why this is one of my more neglected tanks. You'd think when it's so easy to just do a simple water change with a bucket and be done with it, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But for some reason, I guess because it's so easy, I always put it off. And this winds up being one of my tanks that gets a little less maintenance than some of my other ones do. But I've never had any issues with it. This is one of my tanks that just ticks over like a machine, and I never worry about it. So if it's been working for all these years, I don't see any reason to change it now. I never let it go that long. It never gets, insane, out of control. My nitrates probably never get up over 60 parts per million, which is getting a little on the high side, but it's not that big a deal. If you've seen my other videos where I discuss nitrates and how I feel about nitrates, you'll understand that I'm not too concerned about 50 or 60 parts per million nitrates building up in this tank. So we removed a bunch of that floating plant. I got a bunch of that duckweed out of there. If you've got any experience with duckweed personally, you will know that if you leave a single piece of duckweed floating in the tank, you'll have duckweed again. It grows fast and it just completely covers your surface. And for me, getting in here and cleaning duckweed out is probably about the same as the way I get in and clean algae out of other tanks. This tank, knock on wood, is one of the few tanks I've never had any issues with. I've got a rubber lip pleco in here that's about 4 years old now. He does a great job at keeping this tank clean. I've never really had any issues with cyanobacteria. That's not to say I didn't have cyanobacteria in this tank. In fact, when we just pulled the little mat of floating plants out of here, they actually had cyanobacteria growing on the surface to the point where it was actually growing on the surface of the water. I don't know if you've seen some of my other videos where I've shown you how the cyanobacteria will actually grow in these sort of scummy mats that float on the surface. And I did indeed have a little bit of that floating in there. And the reason this tank stays so nice and clean, despite the fact that it's got cyanobacteria in there, is not because the rubber lip will eat cyanobacteria. There is no fish that I know of that eats cyanobacteria. What it does is it eats algae and offwalks, and as it goes around scraping and grazing, the tiny amounts of cyanobacteria that are beginning to grow on the surfaces just get devoured inadvertently along with everything else, and it just never has a chance to get thick. If you've got cyanobacteria in a tank and you've got that green thick stuff growing on your rocks or growing on your glass or something, don't put some kind of algae eater or offwalks grazer. You know, don't put a Chinese algae eater or a rubber lip in there thinking that it's going to take care of your problem. It's not. They don't eat cyanobacteria. If you've got a reasonably clean tank, they will keep it that way. But you've got to give them something fresh to start with. They've got to be able to be grazing on the actual algae, not the cyanobacteria. So that's why this tank always stays so clean. I've got a rubber lip pleco in here, and that's it. I have one rubber lip pleco. I don't have any other kind of algae-eating fish in this tank at all. And you can see with zero algae maintenance or algae control, even the woodwork in there is scraped clean and looks like beautiful, rich wood tone. You know, it doesn't have that black stuff growing on it that you see in some other tanks. Now, this piece of wood up here is a little bit different story, and I guess that rubber lip pleco never really makes it that far up, or never really worries about grazing on that piece of wood. He only focuses on the wood that's down here at the bottom. Anyway, I did not have that intention of this being another video about cyanobacteria. I do them all the time because I have a lot of fish tanks, and just about all of them have cyanobacteria in them that I have to deal with at some point, sooner or later. So I guess me talking about it's not that big a deal because I talk about it in a lot of my other videos. Anyway, there's your before and after. This is my 29 miscellaneous. Make sure you're subscribed. That way you don't miss anything else I've got coming up. Thanks for watching this one. I hope to see you real soon in the next one.